I'll never forget the day I saw it on the news. A single headline that made me stop mid-bite. Even China's shocked. For once, it wasn't about war or politics or the usual nonsense. It was about us, Filipinos. Somehow, we'd done something the world said we couldn't. Something so massive, even global superpowers had to pause and say, wait, they did what? And that's when it hit me. This wasn't luck. This was the quiet rise of a nation the world has underestimated for too long. What the Philippines just achieved is nothing short of impossible. If you're interested in this topic, hit the like button, subscribe, and type interested in the comments, and I will give you a heart. Let's get one thing straight. The world never expected this. For decades, headlines painted the Philippines as a place of typhoons, traffic, and tragedy. A country always recovering, never rising. But then, something changed. And now, even China, yes, China, the self-proclaimed king of impossible projects, is staring at the Philippines like, how the hell did they pull that off? Here's the thing. The Philippines just did what no one thought it could. It's quietly turning into the innovation capital of Southeast Asia. I know, that sounds wild, but let's talk about the receipts. First, the new Manila International Airport. When it was first announced, most people laughed. Filipinos can't build something like that, they said. That's too big, too ambitious. Fast forward to now, it's almost done, and it's set to become one of the largest and most advanced airports in the entire world. Bigger than Singapore's Changi, more efficient than Hong Kong's Cheklap Kok, built on reclaimed land by Filipino hands. And guess who's paying attention? China. Because for the first time, they're seeing a Southeast Asian neighbor compete head-to-head in infrastructure and actually win. Then came the Bulacan Aerotropolis, a mega smart city being constructed around that airport, complete with green tech, renewable grids, and autonomous transport systems. Think Dubai, but run by engineers who grew up fixing tricycles in flooded streets. That's Filipino genius. Resourceful, humble, and unstoppable. Even Chinese analysts, the same ones who once mocked the Philippines as the weak link of ASEAN, are now writing think pieces saying the Philippines is becoming a regional economic threat. And here's where it gets spicy. Because this impossible transformation didn't come from billionaires or politicians, it came from the people. OFW sending money home for decades built the foundation of this miracle. Every remittance wasn't just cash, it was investment. The nurse in London, the seafarer in Greece, the domestic worker in Dubai, they are the real architects of this new Philippines. They funded the education of the next generation of coders, engineers, scientists, and innovators who are now reshaping the country from within. That's what China didn't see coming. They thought influence was built through dominance. Filipinos built it through devotion. And if you want proof of how deep this shift goes, look at the tech sector. Filipino developers are now being hired directly by Silicon Valley, not as remote assistants, but as innovators. In 2024, the Philippines surpassed India in global BPO satisfaction rankings, meaning the world now trusts Filipino brains over Indian call centers. That's not small, that's historic. And just when China thought it had total control over AI and blockchain innovation, guess who entered the conversation? Filipino tech startups like PDAEX, Gcash, and CoinsPH, now in partnerships with Ripple and MasterCard. In 2025, CoinsPH even announced they'd help roll out CBDCs, digital peso systems, a step that puts the Philippines ahead of China's digital yuan in regional fintech adoption. Yeah, that's the impossible. A nation that once begged for loans is now teaching others how to manage digital finance. And if that doesn't shake Beijing, the next part surely does. Because the Philippines isn't just rising economically, it's rising geopolitically. China's entire South China Sea strategy, built on intimidation, is suddenly losing grip. Why? Because the Philippines stopped bowing. The same country, once bullied into silence, is now leading international coalitions, filing maritime cases, upgrading alliances, and get this, being backed by Japan, Australia, the US, and even India. Even Chinese state media had to admit in early 2025 that the Philippines has demonstrated an unexpected level of strategic confidence. Unexpected? No, it's overdue. The Filipino spirit has always been fire under pressure, and right now, that pressure's turning into power. Let's pause right there, because this is where it gets personal. For years, people joked about Filipino time, jeepney chaos, slow progress, but those same traits they laughed at, adaptability, improvisation, relentless endurance, are exactly what made us capable of doing what China can't: innovate with heart. While China builds cities that look perfect but feel empty, the Philippines is building communities that feel alive. That's what scares them. You can copy architecture, you can copy policies, but you can't copy soul. If you believe this new chapter of the Philippines deserves the world's attention, drop Pinoy pride in the comments right now, because we're not just witnessing history, we're rewriting it. Now let's get real. It wasn't easy. This rise didn't happen overnight. The Philippines has been through political storms, corruption, brain drain, and 1,000 false starts. But maybe that's what makes this impossible moment so powerful. Because the world expected the country to stay broken, but instead we turned every wound into a weapon. Our people didn't wait for permission to evolve. They just did, quietly. And now it's too late for the world to ignore us. Even China, with its trillions, tech, and top-down control, can't replicate what we have, a decentralized network of Filipino minds working across the globe but connected by one thing: home. Every OFW, every entrepreneur, every digital freelancer, we're building a collective empire. No flags, no borders, just progress. And that's what this new record represents. The impossible isn't just an airport or a project or a political win. The impossible is a mindset shift from being seen as workers to being respected as world changers. The Philippines is no longer waiting for the future, but the Philippines is the future. When news broke of what the Philippines had accomplished, it wasn't just a headline. It was a tremor that ran through Beijing's steel towers and Washington's marble halls. The impossible wasn't just an engineering project or a digital breakthrough. It was the psychological shift of a nation everyone thought would stay on its knees. Suddenly, global analysts weren't talking about developing Asia anymore. They were talking about the Filipino model. And trust me, that phrase alone made a few politicians choke on their imported coffee. For the first time, China saw something it couldn't compute: growth powered by people, not by government control. The Philippines, this so-called small player, had done what most megastates couldn't. It rose through humility. No propaganda, no massive military parades, no superpower branding, just quiet, consistent progress. And China, they were shocked because they realized they had never prepared for this version of the Filipino story. See, Beijing's playbook was built around control. Control the narrative, control the economy, control the people. But the Filipino advantage has never been control, it's connection. While China spent billions building ports under its Belt and Road Initiative, Filipinos were building relationships in every continent. You can't quantify that kind of diplomacy. The world doesn't fear the Philippines, it trusts it. That's something no money or missile can buy. And when this trust began turning into influence, China started paying attention. Reports from the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences in 2025 revealed a shift in Southeast Asian labor and tech networks. The Philippines had become the new hub of innovation, logistics, and digital workforce in Asia. While China faced labor shortages and slowed exports, Filipino remote teams were powering companies in Japan, Korea, the US, and even Chinese startups who quietly outsourced to Manila because Filipinos get the job done right. Imagine that. A country once labeled the help, now helping the biggest industrial empire stay functional. That irony didn't go unnoticed. Chinese commentators started asking dangerous questions on Weibo. Why can a smaller country like the Philippines keep growing while we slow down? And that question hit nerves, because the answer wasn't about GDP or trade, it was about spirit. The Filipino workforce doesn't just follow systems, they improve them. They don't just meet quotas, they build communities around them. When China's corporate culture burned people out, the Filipino work ethic introduced something the modern world forgot: human warmth. And this is where the impossible really begins to make sense. It wasn't about one project, it was about a pattern. Every time the world doubted the Philippines, the country turned that doubt into discipline. When the peso fell, OFWs carried it. When typhoons hit, we rebuilt stronger. When people left, they sent back dreams that fueled an entire economy. You can't measure that kind of resilience in data charts, it's in DNA. Even international analysts now say the Philippines has something called compassion-driven development. It's the idea that growth doesn't come from competition, but contribution. You help others rise, and the entire nation rises with you. Sounds simple, but it's revolutionary. And China's struggling to copy it because you can't command compassion. It has to be felt. By late 2025, China's Global Times ran an article titled "The Philippines' Surprising Ascent in the Pacific." Notice the word surprising. They didn't expect this, because for years, China's influence grew by building physical infrastructure, bridges, railways, skyscrapers. But the Philippines built emotional infrastructure, loyalty, trust, and reliability. That's the stuff that holds up global industries when politics crumble. Meanwhile, Filipino seafarers still control over 25% of the world's shipping manpower. Filipino healthcare workers dominate hospitals in the Middle East, Europe, and North America. Filipino teachers, engineers, and creatives are running global teams remotely. The irony? The Philippines is everywhere and nowhere. The world runs on Filipino labor, but most don't realize it until we're gone. And that's exactly what happened during the 2020 labor crisis. When global migration policies tightened, millions of Filipino workers couldn't travel, and entire economies crashed. Hotels in Dubai, hospitals in London, shipyards in Korea, they all slowed down. The world had just learned the hard truth. The global system collapses without the Filipino backbone. Even China, with its self-sufficient economy, faced ripple effects. Manufacturing chains that quietly relied on Filipino logistics, shipping, and call center support hit delays. And that's when Beijing quietly reached out. Behind closed doors, trade attaches began discussing increased cooperation with Filipino logistics and tech sectors. Translation, they needed us. And let's not forget, the Philippines didn't do this through exploitation. We did it through excellence. We didn't cheat, threaten, or colonize. We worked. We sacrificed. We smiled through pain. We showed up when others walked out. That's what no superpower can replicate. You know what's funny? For years, China invested billions to win friends across Asia. Yet the Philippines, without even trying, won hearts. You can't buy that. If you believe the world is finally realizing the truth about Filipino power, type "real recognize real" in the comments right now. Let's make this message echo across every algorithm out there. Because this story isn't just about geopolitics, it's personal. It's about every Filipino who ever felt underestimated. Every worker who got looked down on for their accent or passport. The same people the world ignored are now its most essential players. And that's not opinion, that's fact. Economists at Bloomberg and the IMF now track remittance-driven resilience, a term literally coined to describe the Philippines. The idea that even during global recessions, Filipino income keeps flowing into the economy because of OFWs. That's not just stability, that's global insurance powered by emotion and loyalty. China can build cities overnight, but they crumble without community. The Philippines takes years to build one thing, but when it's built, it lasts. And that's why even Chinese commentators now admit Filipinos are redefining Asian strength. It's no longer about dominance, it's about dependability. And in a world burning from arrogance, the Philippines stands tall through humility. That's the impossible story. Not the rise of a country, but the rise of a consciousness that being kind, hardworking, and humble doesn't make you weak, it makes you unstoppable. You know what's crazy? For years, people said the Philippines was just a country of helpers. That word helpers was thrown around like an insult. But now, the world's realizing that without those helpers, entire nations stop functioning. The Filipino worker, the Filipino dreamer, the Filipino hustler. These are the unsung architects of modern civilization. And the irony is brutal. While other countries fight for domination, we've been quietly building the foundations they stand on. Our Filipino stars, our country of influencers. Our Filipino football fans, we've been fighting for influences for decades. Here's what's wild. When the Philippines breaks a record, it's not always on the news, but the consequences ripple everywhere. Look at global healthcare. In 2025, the World Health Organization admitted that 1 in every 8 nurses worldwide is Filipino. That means every hospital emergency, every patient recovery, every ICU shift somewhere in the world has a Filipino hand behind it. And when countries like the UK and Canada faced post-pandemic shortages, who saved their healthcare systems? Filipinos. Not once, not twice, but consistently. That's not just contribution, that's quiet domination. And guess what? China noticed. Because while they boast about exporting technology, we've been exporting humanity. You can copy software, but you can't mass produce soul. You can automate machines, but you can't replace care. That's the difference. Filipinos don't just build, they believe. They don't just heal, they hope. And in a world that's losing its humanity, that's the most valuable resource on earth. The numbers are staggering. In 2025 alone, Filipino overseas workers sent home $38 billion, 0 cents in remittances. That's nearly the entire GDP of some countries. But here's the twist. Those dollars didn't just stay in banks. They built houses, paid tuition, fed families, started small businesses. Every peso sent home was like a heartbeat keeping the economy alive. You can't quantify that kind of love-driven economy. That's not finance. That's faith in motion. And while the West calls it remittance, I call it reinvestment in roots. Even the International Monetary Fund admitted in a recent report that the Philippine remittance network represents one of the most stable financial systems on the planet. Let that sink in. While superpowers collapse under debt and inflation, Filipino workers, nurses, teachers, seafarers, engineers are literally holding the global economy together. You can't teach that kind of resilience. You can only live it. And that's why this latest impossible record wasn't just a victory, it was an awakening. It reminded the world that the Filipino spirit doesn't need permission to rise. It rises in spite of everything, in spite of corruption, in spite of underfunded schools, in spite of politics that would have broken any other nation. See, that's the real miracle. Not that we succeed, but that we succeed no matter what. Even China, with its endless manpower and trillion-dollar projects, still can't figure us out. They spend fortunes on surveillance, strategy, and state control, and yet they can't predict the most powerful force in Asia, a Filipino who refuses to give up. Because what drives us isn't fear, it's family. We don't work to dominate, we work to deliver. We don't fight to control, we fight to care. And in the end, that's why we win. If you're proud of what Filipinos have accomplished, type "We rise" in the comments. Let's remind the world that humility is not weakness, it's strength in disguise. Now, let's talk about the bigger picture. Because this isn't just about labor or remittance, it's about leadership. Filipinos are no longer just employees of the world. We're becoming influencers of global culture, the emotional engine behind industries that once ignored us. From K-pop backup dancers to Silicon Valley developers, from caregivers in Rome to coders in Tokyo, the Filipino fingerprint is everywhere. And when the Philippines breaks another record, it's not luck, it's a pattern. In the past decade, Filipino startups have tripled. The nation's digital literacy rate has skyrocketed. Even our space agency, yes, PhilSA, has launched projects that rival early NASA programs. The world doesn't even realize it yet, but we're entering a golden era of innovation. China may have satellites, but we have spirit that transcends gravity. That's what's making headlines in think tanks from Washington to Singapore. The Philippines is no longer the sleeping giant of Asia, it's the smiling one. And that line says it all, because we're rising not with aggression, but with grace. Filipinos don't shout our victories, we live them. We don't brag, we build. We don't conquer, we connect. That's the energy that terrifies the world's elites, because they've built their empires on fear and control, but the Filipino empire is built on faith and community. And here's the truth no one wants to admit. While other nations measure success in weapons and wealth, we measure it in how many lives we lift along the way. That's why this record, whatever it may be, in innovation, remittance, tech, or compassion, means more than any trophy. It's a reminder that the Filipino dream isn't about power, it's about purpose. And maybe, just maybe, that's why even China is watching in silence. Because they see something they can't replicate. A nation that leads with heart. So the next time someone calls Filipinos helpers, remind them, yes, we help. Because helping is what heroes do. And one day, soon, the world will finally say it out loud. The future doesn't belong to superpowers. It belongs to the super-hearted.